Path of Exile 2 is 100% without a doubt the future for grinding gear games and the Path of Exile franchise as a whole. Now, before you PoE1 veterans pull out your pitchforks, just hold on for just a second and listen. Maybe and hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from after this. So I just booted up Path of Exile 1 and played seriously for the first time in about 8 years, I'd say. The last time I actually spent a lot of time playing Path of Exile 1 was in the Abyss League. And I just finished doing the campaign and doing some maps in the Legacy of Pharesia Event League. And I've really come to the conclusion after this that, in my opinion, Path of Exile 2 really is just the way forward for the company. Now, to give a little bit of context, I am a PoE veteran in the most casual sense. I've put thousands of hours into the game, mostly off Steam, and I've been playing the game on and off since closed beta in 2012, so I've been playing for quite a while. I still look back fondly to the times where I used to watch Crypt blast through docks with his elemental discharge build, hoping that I could one day build that character to blast through docks myself. Spoiler alert, it never happened. The best I could do at the time was farm Fell Shrine runes on my half-baked, self-made explosive arrow character using Quill Rain and finally making it to the point of docks farming, only to give up shortly after because docks all day was extremely boring, but also because my character would keep dying to the goddamn dogs. Those goddamn fuckers hurt so much back in the day. Not to mention that having to type /OOS every 5 seconds was a goddamn pain in the ass. But eventually, as the game became easier and there was a little bit more quality of life for casual players like myself, I was able to eventually get beyond this and finally get to maps. I'm giving you all this context because while I am a PoE veteran when it comes to the amount of years and hours I've spent playing the game, I've also been playing the game as an extreme casual all of these years, with my furthest progress being the beginning of red maps and never even touching the endgame boss encounters. So I'm not making this video as a way to flex about how long I've been playing the game, but it's really to say that I am the target audience for Path of Exile 2. And I really think that because of this, it is the future of this franchise. Now, I'm not here to shit on PoE1 because I still think that PoE1 is the best ARPG out today. The sheer amount of content and love that GGG have put into this game really shows in the player stats and also the fact that I still keep coming back to play the game despite only experiencing what I would say is less than half of the content that it offers. But going back to playing Path of Exile 1 after all of these years in the Legacy of Pharesia event really makes me realize why I only played less than half of the content and never dove beyond that. And that really is, at the end of the day, because of the casual and new player experience of Path of Exile 1. And to be honest, I think that most people will agree that this is why Path of Exile 2 exists in the first place. First off, I would say that at the base level, the game is downright clunky compared to Path of Exile 2, which may come off as a surprise considering Path of Exile 2 is still in early access. But hear me out. First off, I think that the WASD movement lends itself so well to the ARPG genre. Not only does it open up the avenue for players to have an extremely smooth experience using controllers, but the ability to attack while moving was something that I didn't realize I wanted after all of these years playing Path of Exile 1. While I would hope that they bring this over to Path of Exile 1, I don't think that it would work out very well with the game because, for the most part, players don't even move with their mouse in the first place. As much as players talk about how much they love how fast the game is, it's kind of crazy that half of the time when I'm traversing around the map in Path of Exile 1, I'm not even pressing the mouse button to move, but rather my keyboard to spam my movement skills, making the game extremely jerky and feeling very twitchy. Now, don't get me wrong, I love being able to zoom around the map, and I'm goddamn tired of how big the maps are in Path of Exile 2 without my Quicksilver Flask and my Leap Slam. But at the same time, I don't think that the way Path of Exile 1 has it set right now is the best gaming experience either. I think a really good example of this being the case in the past was with Digital Extremes and Warframe. Now, way back in the day, for those of you guys who did not play Warframe then, there was an advanced technique to move around the map quickly called coptering. It was named this because your character would spin around like a helicopter when using this technique. How it worked was when you would start the animation for a slide by crouching while running, you would quickly cancel that animation with a melee attack. This would take the momentum of the slide combined with the movement of the melee swing to make you zoom across the map. While this ultimately serves its purpose well, Digital Extremes ended up removing this because it wasn't the way that they intended movement to work. But instead of removing it completely and nerfing it, they added bullet jumping, aim gliding, and air dodge rolls, which was, albeit in most cases, way slower than the old coptering method, but ended up just being a more elegant way to move around the map and made the gameplay a lot more smoother and intentional compared to before. Now, I'm not saying that this needs to be removed from PoE 1 because I do think that it is part of what makes PoE 1, but this is definitely not a comfortable way to play the game because on top of spamming your movement keys to move around the map quickly, you also have to piano your flasks while playing the game. And you can't tell me this is the part that makes the game fun. Because as good as Mage Blood is as an item, I'm sure a lot of people really enjoy using the item solely because it removes the need to piano flasks. Path of Exile 2, on the other hand, strips away all of this by making it so that instead of having utility flasks, you have charms that automatically activate and they strip you down to 2 potion slots. And the only real big movement skill is Blink when combined with Temporalis, which under normal circumstances, the number of people who have access to this combination should be fairly limited. I'm looking at you, dupers. Now, this point alone isn't enough for me to think that PoE 2 is the future, but I think that this next point is what wins it over for me completely, and that is the combat. I know that we all like to meme on the quote-unquote meaningful combat in Path of Exile 2, but after playing Path of Exile 1 again, I get it. Now, maybe a large part of this is just me speaking as a softcore Andy, but going through the campaign in Path of Exile 1 is a complete joke. And it didn't used to always be like this. I remember struggling to avoid dying against Roas back in the day, and as I mentioned at the top of this video, those goddamn dogs at the docks were a bitch to deal with. And this is why it's a bit sad to see the campaign reduced to its current state. I was so shocked that in Act 1, the white mobs were dying in one hit to shield charge. Yes, shield charge with no links. I was appalled, and unfortunately, I did end up removing shield charge because I swapped to a two-handed weapon, so I couldn't confirm if this was the case throughout the entire campaign, but my experience stayed the same throughout the entire campaign, and mobs just melted against me. At one point, I was at the end of Act 5 and realized that I forgot to do my Ascendancy in Act 3, and that didn't matter at all, because I was still plowing through mobs without even batting an eye with my Zero Ascendancy Marauder that hadn't even upgraded its weapon in 2 acts, because nothing would goddamn drop me a better two-hand mace. Oh my god. I'm so sorry, I let myself loose there. Now, I did have a few rips here and there to some bosses where I was too lazy to make a portal back to town to refuel my pots, or against some uber juiced menagerie rares, but those deaths were so inconsequential because the boss HP wouldn't reset when you died, so you can literally just kamikaze bomb in there until it died. And the same thing can be said for dying in maps as well. While I understand why bosses had their HP reset in PoE 2 when you died, I never understood why maps would reset when you died. But going through this made me actually realize that this is in part to help make the combat feel more meaningful, because you had to pay attention to yourself and your health, or else you would lose a ton of progress from dying. Either A, losing your progress in that campaign map, being sent back to the checkpoint and having all the monsters respawn, or B, in a map, you just lose the map entirely. I know not everyone will agree with this point, but for me, I think that PoE 2 has meaningful combat, especially during the campaign. And even if it is just during the campaign, I think personally the campaign is the most important part of any game. Now, most people argue that the end game is the most important, which I agree, it is extremely important. It's the sole reason why I play games like PoE and PoE 2. But for most people, the majority of people out there, first impressions matter and are the most important part of playing a game. The majority of people who play games will probably never get to the end of the campaign because of their lifestyle or their way of playing games. But I think it's extremely important to make it so that the only reason why those types of people stop playing the game before reaching the end game is because of those life situations and not because the campaign is boring and unengaging. As good as an endgame is, if the majority of players don't end up reaching it, there might as well be no endgame at all. Now, before we hop into endgame, for those of you guys who have watched this point, I'd like to thank you for listening to me ramble and would love to hear your thoughts so far in the comment section. And if you want to wait until the end of the video to comment, that's fine too. Just leave a little poop emoji for now in the comment section and hit subscribe while you're at it. But moving on to the endgame, I know a lot of you will be like, this is great and all, but the endgame in Path of Exile 2 is extremely bare bones compared to Path of Exile 1. And the crafting, it's non-existent. Now, I completely agree with you, and that is what makes Path of Exile so amazing. The enormous amount of content in the endgame and the multitude of ways that you can make items and not just rely on drops to get your character stronger, but you're completely delusional if you think that GGG won't give the same treatment to PoE 2 as they did with the content in PoE 1. Now, I don't think that we'll ever get to the level of in-depth deterministic crafting in PoE 2 as in PoE 1, because to be honest, that is really the main reason why I stopped playing PoE as much as I did, because I just didn't want to sit there and watch 3 hours of YouTube videos to learn how every form of crafting in the game can help you with this, that, or that. But I do think that they will add more depth to the game in a way that is approachable by new players and veterans alike. So all I can say to this is give the game some time to cook. There's already a lot to like in PoE 2 now, and in the end game, we will get more and more updates, which will make the game better and better over time. So yeah, this is what makes the new player experience so much better in Path of Exile 2. And I would say that the experience of playing Path of Exile 2 in general is much better than playing Path of Exile 1. But why does the new player experience matter so much? Well, it's simple. New players are the lifeblood of any live service game. As much as companies should try to cater to their existing player base to keep them pleased and prevent them from leaving the game, sadly, people will stop playing your game no matter how hard you try to cater to them. Even if you have 100% satisfaction from your existing players, there will be players that'll eventually stop playing the game, whether that be because they get bored of the game, or they want to play another game for that league and return later, or it's because of a real life circumstance. Maybe things like they just became a mother or a father and don't have time for Path of Exile anymore, or maybe they just got excommunicated off this corporeal realm. You know, that happens, right? Players will eventually stop playing a game no matter how much a developer caters to their existing audience, which is why it's important for companies to make it so that with every existing player that stops playing the game, there's at least one new player that starts to replace that player, making it so that the game will just not die over time. So yeah, this is why I think Path of Exile 2 is the future. It's not because Path of Exile 1 is a worse game by any means. Like I said, Path of Exile 1 is way better than Path of Exile 2 in its current state. But the problem with Path of Exile 1 is that it just doesn't attract new players like Path of Exile 2 does. And we've already seen it in the numbers right now in early access, and those numbers will only grow when the game fully comes out and is free when the game hits 1.0. And no, I don't think that Path of Exile 1 is going to die. The future that I see is Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 existing together as separate games. But what I will say is that most of the new players who are looking to hop into the franchise is probably going to pick up Path of Exile 2 over Path of Exile 1, where Path of Exile 1 will keep its really core and dedicated audience and grow maybe slightly, but most of the growth and most of the new players are going to go to Path of Exile 2 and maybe eventually trickle over to Path of Exile 1, with Path of Exile 2 as kind of a gateway drug. So yes, I do think that Path of Exile 2 is the future, and it's not to say that you should stop playing Path of Exile 1 and keep playing Path of Exile 2. So yeah, let me know down in the comment section of what you guys think. Do you agree or do you disagree? Are there any more points you wanted to add, or do you think there's anything that I missed? And as always, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting the subscribe button. That is completely free of charge to you, and it helps me a ton. But also, I stream on twitch.tv/misoxshiro every single night, so come hang out. But until next time, guys, I hope y'all have a good one, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. All right, guys, peace.